Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lisa Compardo. I work for RBC as the Community Manager for the Strathcona Market in Vancouver. I'm joining you today from the Strathcona community, located on the traditional and ancestral and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, which includes the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. RBC is thrilled to be the presenting sponsor for this very important program, enabling our youth in Canada to learn about the amazing culture and heritage of our Indigenous people. Today's presentation is entitled Twice Colonized, and I'm honored to introduce our knowledge keeper, Aaju Peter. Aaju Peter's life has taken her from northern Greenland to Denmark, parts of Europe, and Nunavut, Canada, where she has become an interpreter, a lawyer, and a known business person advocating for Inuit rights on seal issues related to Arctic waters. Aaju has prepared an insightful presentation for us today, so please sit back and enjoy today's presentation.
When I'm Cree from Nishtawayasik Cree Nation. So I say Tansa, hello and welcome. I bring you greetings as I am a visitor from Toronto. I'm on the land that I'm standing on today. It's the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee. And the Wendat people is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So I'd like to acknowledge that the place that I bring you greetings, and I also want to acknowledge a beautiful guest who's joining us today, Aaju Peters. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I was born in Greenland, and that was a Danish colony. And then I went to school in Denmark. I came back to Greenland when I was 18. I couldn't speak my own language, and that made me feel really bad. I moved to Canada in 1981, Canadian Arctic, and that's where I am ever since. I had 5 children. I was in school, I took law, and I've been advocating for Inuit right to hunt seal, Inuit language and culture. And that's where I am today, still fighting. But right now we are doing a documentary that's titled Twice Colonized. And the documentary is about me being colonized by the Danes and then colonized again by the Canadian system. So it's a very interesting journey we are on right now.
Mm-hmm. Can you share a little more of your experience of being in school? And you moved to away from the family at age 11?
Yes. So those were the 60s where there was a policy where we had to learn Danish and everything Danish was great. So when we were 11, we were sent off to school in Denmark, totally different environment. Only we had to speak Danish, and it was very foreign to me. But my father wanted me to continue my schooling in Denmark, so I stayed there till I was 18.
My understanding, you know a lot of different languages. Is that where you immerse yourself in learning other languages?
Well, we were in the academic stream, and in the academic stream, you had to learn Danish, English, French, German, and Latin. But nobody taught me my own language. So our own language was not being taught, and our culture was not being taught.
Mhm.
So now I speak the Inuit language, the Greenlandic language, and Danish and English, four of them fluently.
What was it like to come home after being in school at 18, and not being able to like communicate with your family and in your language?
You know, it's gonna sound strange, but I never thought about it. It wasn't until I came home and sat at the table and I couldn't speak to my own mother because she didn't speak Danish.
Mhm.
Fortunately, my father was very good at speaking Danish, and some of my siblings could speak the language. So it was a shock to me. Um, and I blamed myself. I thought it was my own fault. It's not until now, 50 years later, I was just back in Denmark. I thought, well, it wasn't my fault. I was being taught all those different languages, but I wasn't being taught my own language. I don't know whose great idea it was, but it was very narrow. Um, it made me feel it was my own fault that I couldn't.
Long process.
It's not until this trip, 50 years after I had first been sent and then coming back to Denmark, I realized for 50 years I thought it was my own fault. Um, Now I realized, well, I couldn't blame myself because nobody spoke to me in Greenlandic. There was no opportunity to speak Greenlandic. So now I feel much better because the loss of language and the loss of culture and the loss of connection to my own country um, fueled me with this fire that I had to start promoting and fighting for Inuit rights, Inuit language, and Inuit culture because I had already gone through the process and I did not want that to happen to the people that to another place, this time the capital of Greenland, which is Nuuk. And at that time was the first Inuit circumpolar conference happening
Mhm.
in 1979. And he became my husband. And I moved to Canada.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I actually
Yes.
met my husband at a gathering. um, but that's wonderful. Now, when you're talking about being introduced to other Inuit people, where is that where you reclaimed your culture or being connected to or finding that deep?
Yes, I do believe that was my salvation because when I moved to the Canadian Arctic, to the Inuit, my in laws were unilingual. I had to learn the Inuit language. And I was, people were so happy every time I could learn to say one word and then another word. I wasn't being shamed like I was in Greenland for my lack of knowledge. I learned it really fast because of that environment.
Because you had a supportive environment and
Yeah,
excitement that you're taking it in and learning and
yeah.
speaking it with no judgment.
Yes, that's the key. That's
Mhm.
the key. If we want our youth and children to learn our language and culture, we have to be happy. Even if they make mistakes, we have to applaud them and treat them with a lot of love because they want to learn it and not make them ashamed.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, what path did you take when you settled in Canada? How was that process of family was an instrumental decision in moving. Um, did you settle in one place or were
Yeah.
you in different places together starting the family?
We moved to Iqaluit, and outside of Iqaluit, there's a small community called Neaqungud, and that's where my husband and his family lived, my in-laws. So we were living with my in-laws, and my mother-in-law had led an organization that was the women's group, auxiliary group. So I was just following her, being with her, learning all the different skills that women need to have, learning the language. And before I knew it, I remember sitting with her. This was about 3 years later, 4 years later. I was sitting with her, interpreting for her because she was setting up a women's shelter and a food bank.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh my goodness, how did this happen? Um, so it just happened.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. Like already um, putting yourself in the community and assisting the community, as we say in my culture, is how we're a part of the circle, and you being in that circle is super important. And the things, the gifts and time and offerings that you give is very important because it helps build and strengthen community.
Yes, I was very lucky. I had no other family, no siblings. I was just solo mio and um, dove into this culture and the language, and I just totally became part of it. That was just fantastic.
Oh, that's wonderful. Um, so you've traveled the globe, going advocating for a seal hunt. And can you tell us a little more about that message and the things that you would carry with you?
Since I moved here, when I moved here, that was the first ban on seal pups. The animal rights groups had managed to ban and were all that anti-stealing campaign that was happening just killed our livelihood and our um, economy. And then leading up to 2000, in 2007, just before 2007, the animal rights groups had been posting for and campaigning against stealing all this time after 1983. And then they were becoming successful again to totally ban import of seal into Europe. The first country was Germany that banned the import of seal. And then I started traveling to Europe protesting their anti sealing in 2007. That was when Holland was talking about banning the import of seal. And when they banned the import of seal, the, the Europeans decided, well, we are just going to have a unilateral ban into all the 25, 26 European countries of the import of seal. So that was successful. They successfully banned the import of seal for all European countries in 2009. And I've been just uh, it's very hard to do anything when you're alone and when you don't have money, when you don't have anything, any support, any organizational support, nothing. So that was hard to try to make my voice heard, um, and then protesting the legislation, but it was too late. Our voice was not strong enough.
Mhm. And even just listening to that perspective of why it's important um, for the community, for the people, and the implications that it's had on many individuals, I don't think that that perspective was heard. Um,
It wasn't what people were what people heard and saw were the images. An image of a sealer clapping a seal on white snow, and the blood is left on the white snow. That is a very strong message, an image, and it's been hard for us to try to fight an image that's so imprinted in the world population. Mind you, the people who pass these legislations and are against the hunting are people who just go to a store to buy their chicken, their pig, and their cow. They never have to hunt it themselves, never have to cut it out themselves. They just buy it in a little package where it doesn't look anything like a chicken or a cow. So that was very hard. The effect of those legislations and anti-sealing meant that people couldn't sustain themselves anymore. They didn't have any money to buy fuel, to buy ammunition, to go out hunting, because our hunters in Canada, in the Arctic, they don't sell their meat. They share it with other community members and their family. And it's nutritious food. It's very healthy food for us because we live in a cold environment. So it made life that was already so hard to provide for your family and to have food much harder. And I found that to be such an injustice. It was so not just. And animal rights groups and people who give money to the anti-sealing had no idea what they were doing.
mhm. And even just as you were talking about food security, I don't think people knew like the costs associated with even just getting food in the north, how astronomical the prices are, and how important it is, to go and get food and go hunting, and it's none goes to waste, that it is shared within the community, that it's not just for me and my home, but also for my neighbors or my relatives. Um, so when you brought those messages forward, do you do you think that it was received?
Not at all, because Europeans had already made up their minds. And we were demonstrating in Brussels in 2008, and an old guy from Brussels came to me and he asked, "What are you guys doing?" I said, "We are demonstrating against the ceiling ban." And he said, "Well, he would support the anti-sealing because these are free ranging animals and they should be allowed to be free." And he said that it was okay to have cows and pigs and chicken raised to be killed because that's all their life was. That totally did not make sense to me. But that was the thinking and the explanation that it's okay to have farms to raise animals because they're going to be killed and they're raised for the food, and that we should just leave all the seals free roaming and swimming their free life.
Completely different
Yeah.
perspectives and views. Yeah.
So detached from how life is done, how we live in the Arctic. Another young protester said in 2007, I had brought my teenage son with me, and this was a teenage young demonstrator who held a big poster of a seal being clubbed on the ice. And he said, well, I said, you are attacking my son's way of life. You are telling him that he cannot be a hunter so he can provide for his family and support his community.
Yeah.
Well, you shouldn't kill seals. You should just grow vegetables, he said. And I said, you know what? Our land is all covered in snow and ice, and there's permafrost where we live. We cannot grow anything. And then his logic was, well, why don't you all just move to Holland? And I said, I don't think so because our ice is melting and Holland is under the level of water that as our ice is melting, your land is going to be underwater first. Maybe you guys should move to Canada instead.
Are these events, in terms of your timeline and how you went back to law, was this one of the motivating factors to kind of get an clearer understanding of how what rights you have, or how to bring those forward or advocate?
Well, when in 2000 they were going to set up a program here, a one-time program, because Canada is the only country that doesn't have a university in the Arctic. All the other northern countries have universities in the Arctic, except for Canada. This program was going to be offered one time in 2001. So I filled out an application. I wanted to fill out an application for my son. He was 18 at the time. And the guy who was running it, he said, well, he's too young. Of course, he's not too young. Anyways, I filled it out. I got accepted because I didn't want that opportunity to be wasted. It did give me an excellent education in law, which has been useful because when I go to speak and when I go to demonstrate, this is Aaju Peter, mother of five, doesn't hack it. I am not seen as an equal. So when I'm introduced as Aaju Peter, lawyer, Order of Canada, suddenly that is a language that is understood by Westerners. So it's sad that we are not recognized the way that we recognize our own people. It is sad that we always have to be recognized by the terms of the Westerners.
Did you have to go to the south to take these classes, or move from home? Like how did you do your
This
study?
was this was brilliant because otherwise we would all have moved south because that's where the universities are. But this program was being delivered in my home community, so it made it possible to take it.
You still have your supports when you can take the classes at home.
I didn't have any support because I had left my husband. Therefore, I was all by myself,
Mm.
no family, no nothing, and five little children. And this was law was using my fourth language, so it was extremely difficult for me. But um, even though it was difficult, I'm glad I took it. I'm glad I managed to push through and graduate. Yeah.
It is harder when you are a mother, and you are doing this not just for yourself but also for your children, right? And making that commitment and that determination to finish your education. It requires a lot of time and dedication.
I was just meeting with a young Greenlandic lawyer in Denmark, and she said, you know, as indigenous peoples, we tend to take law and we tend to focus on helping our community. What are the disadvantages? What are the things that we can do to help our community versus Western lawyer who does it for himself or for herself. This is my cause, and I'm going to take these cases. I'm going to be a great lawyer. But I, there is that distinction because we are raised in a different environment, and because we are so focused on our communities, we tend to want to help our community the way our community helps us.
So you're also a filmmaker, and you're currently working
I'm
on a
I'm not
documentary.
a filmmaker. I tend to be the subject or the one who is being filmed. I would not know how to do film myself,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm in three documentaries already, and now we are making the fourth one. This one is called Twice Colonized, which is very interesting because I'm trying to sort through the first time I was colonized and then sort through the second time and figuring it out and trying to figure out what is decolonization and what is the true Inuit way of being, and how do you talk about that today when our minds are so colonized ourselves. So that's been a very interesting, still is very interesting topic and journey.
No, that sounds really interesting, and it's good to have those conversation, those dialogues um, on looking at the ramification of colonization and how do we decolonize and what does that mean? What
Yeah,
does that look like? What does the future hold? And I'm excited
mhm,
to take in this documentary. It sounds
yeah.
really good.
It's a very interesting trip journey that I'm on because what is that? What is decolonization? What is decolonizing your mind, and what does that look like? But at the same time, I'm also meeting with leaders, indigenous leaders, because I would like to see what I have really, really missed in Europe at the Parliament, at the Union, was support from indigenous people, uh, representation by indigenous people. So what I really would like to see formed is an organization that will ensure that we have a permanent presence in the European Union, because the EU makes so much legislation that directly or indirectly affect us, and we need to be part of that dialogue. We need to have presence there, not just on Indigenous Peoples Day, which is one day at the EU. That is not enough. That is not enough.
That is encouraging to hear that you're a part of that movement and part of engaging activity to understand the magnitude of having a seat at the table.
Yeah, that's a very interesting journey, and I hope that it will happen sooner or later. I mean, sooner, not later, because we need to have a voice that is there, um, not just one day of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's reconciliation, right?
Yeah,
What is the action part, and not
yeah,
just acknowledging the one day of
yeah.
reconciliation.
I love that word. I'm gonna use it. Reconciliation.
Yeah, it's a term that I'm not sure who the origins of that word came from, but as soon as I heard it, it just resonated with me because, the it's it's a dialogue that I like to have with other individuals, indigenous and non-indigenous, because we all take a part in what does reconciliation mean, and what does reconciliation mean, what action are we taking, what
Yeah.
conversations are we having, and purposeful, meaningful connections where we're having a seat at that table and coming together constructively, right? So, and finding
Mm-hmm.
solutions together, um, but importantly, hearing the two perspectives, the other perspectives, because so often, and even as you're sharing your story, you know, we don't have that opportunity most times. And
No,
and I think even just in this week, this Truth and Reconciliation Week is a commitment of learning and engaging and participating and taking the time to understand elders and hearing our knowledge keepers and hearing our advocates like yourself sharing those unique experiences um, that have and hold truth to what the realities are that we face. And thank you for your time and your commitment and sharing with us today. But before we go, I wanted to ask, like, what's next for you? You've done so many amazing things, but what is the next steps that you're taking?
at the moment, I'm writing a book. I'm not 100% sure on the title, but it's something in line with my decolonizing journey. What is it that I'm going through? And because what does it mean to decolonize yourself? So I would like to expand more on that. First being colonized and then going through the process of healing and decolonizing. But the other tangible thing that I'm in the process of just is we really need to push for a seat at the European Parliament as indigenous peoples. That's my next goal because when I used to go and lobby for Inuit sealing and Inuit rights, I wish there had been an organization that I could be with, that could support me, that could lead me the right directions. And yeah, I would like to see that being done. I was thinking about this while I was in Europe just now, where people are saying, well, you're not, Canada is not part of the EU. So my argument is, so why on earth did they pass a legislation that affected the Canadians so gravely? So that argument is out of the window. It is not whether a state is part of the EU, it is for indigenous peoples because we are not recognized as states ourselves in law. But the legislations that are made, that are passed in EU, at the European Union, affect us. Therefore, we need to have a place there where we can be heard as a group, not as just one person, because it's so easy to not listen to just one person. It's going to be a much stronger voice when we together support each other.
Communities are connected, similar to how my perspective of we see Turtle Island, right? And how we're connected, and there's not necessarily this idea of borders um, is is different for us. And I think it's similar. If I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but it's similar thinking that of connection, connectivity in the north.
Before nation states took colonies of our lands, of our people, we were one country. I mean, we were one people. Siberian Inuit, Alaskan Inuit, Canadian Inuit, and Greenlandic Inuit. We are all one people. What is separating us is the Danish government, the Canadian government, the United States, and Russia. So they are the ones who are separating us. But initially, 5,000 to 10,000 years ago, we were all one people. We are calling it the land of the Inuit, Inuit Nunangat. We speak the same language. Um, Greenland, Canada, and Alaska. We we are of the same people. what happened was the Greenlanders then immigrated to Greenland, moving further and further from Alaska, Siberia, Alaska, Canada, and then eventually to Greenland. But we still have the same customs. We eat seal. We look the same. We are descended from the same people. Just our nation states are separating us with borders.
I speak TH dialect, and hers is Y dialect. So it is a little, there's similarities to the language, but there's
Yeah.
a little bit of a difference in the way we speak.
The same thing with the Alaskan, Canadian, and Inuit in Greenland, because we've been separated for so long. We have some words that are different, but if you are a proficient Inuit speaker in Canada, you can understand a proficient Greenlandic speaker because they're the same language, just a few differences.
I was in the same boat as you, growing up, not not at home. I went to the South to learn, to take my education. When I went home as a teenager, now I found myself sitting at the table listening to my cousins, my aunties, my uncles, my kukum speaking the language, and I'm going, I don't know what was said. I'm trying to listen. I was trying to understand, and they were really patient with me and picking up and learning the language. Um, but there was a time in my years where I was left out, where I didn't know and felt the same as what did I do, or that responsibility that I don't know my own language. And
Yeah.
and it took several years to feel confident enough to call home and say danza and say several lines to my loved ones and understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And my journey has come full circle, I find, after half a century, and then after moving to Canada, I'm now teaching adult Inuit their own language that I learned when I moved here. Either they didn't have the opportunity or they forgot their own language. So it is with great pleasure that I'm now um, teaching the language that I was taught here to the next generation.
Oh, I also wanted to talk about your headband. That's beautiful. I like the designs on that.
So in 17 years ago, I was sitting across a young woman. We were just finishing filmmaking course, of course, it was a very short course. She was sitting right across from me, and she said, "I want Inuit traditional tattoos." And without thinking, I said, "Me too." So the two of us started on a 5-year journey. Our elders back then remembered still their mothers and their grandmothers and their aunties still wearing the traditional tattoos. And they would say, as children, when we would see women without tattoos, they looked so bare, like something was missing. So 12 years ago, after that journey, 5 years of recording all the stories of who could have tattoos and what were the designs and what did they mean, we finally had our tattoos. And since then, Greenlanders have taken it over with galore. Inuit women and young women have taken it over. All the designs that are here, this is Greenlandic. They've taken over all the Greenlandic and Inuit designs and then putting them on fabric, putting them on themselves, putting them on clothes. It's just gone viral. And I had no idea that Inuit women would take with such pride the culture that was almost lost, that was forbidden by the missionaries, that we were able to reclaim it, and it's incredible.
Oh,
It's amazing.
that's amazing. That's powerful. Is it hand
Very.
tattoo or is it the needle and poke tattoo?
Back then, when we were ready to have our own tattoos, there was nobody who could do the hand tattoos up here that we knew of. So we had a tattoo artist who made a special um, um, electrical machine that he only used for Inuit tattoos, and he tattooed us. But since then, there are many Inuit women who do the thread and needle now. So the tradition is coming back.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Well, I'm trying to see if there are other questions. I guess that is a process of reclaiming your culture of the
Oh
tattooing.
man, that was so cool. That was so cool because my hand tattoos respect the mother of the sea who provides all the sea mammals, who provides all the food. And the facial tattoo welcomes back the sun after the winter when it has disappeared. And then it comes back in early January 13, it comes back in the horizon. And the woman's facial tattoos are to welcome back the sun. It's all respect for the environment and on all of this that we depend as people, as indigenous people.
Thank you. Thank you for that
Thank you.
teaching.
Thank
um,
you.
so this session is going to go to schools all across Canada. We might have up to 1 million students listening and taking in your session. Is there a message that you would like to give to our young people, our Canadians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous? Is there a message that you would like to bring forward to the youth of today?
I'm always so happy to talk to youth because youth are open minded. They are so open minded. They want to learn, they want to listen. And I'm always so grateful because they're so excited. Like, oh, what? They literally walk up to me and start touching me. What are those and what do they mean? It is so nice to have youth who want to learn because they are so open. Our hope is youth. And I'm so happy. I'm so pleased that they're all going to watch or are watching this now. Thanks to you guys. Keep learning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I love that. I love how it's very true. Young people are so curious and so genuine. It comes from a genuine
Yeah.
perspective. I want to know you. I want to know your
Yeah.
story. What does this mean? And can I touch it or can I connect with you? And
Like
that's so beautiful.
on this trip, I was sailing over to meet two Greenlandic artists in Denmark. So I had to take the ferry to this island. And in the ferry were an excursion of young people, of children who were away from their school on an excursion. And here I found myself because they started asking me questions in the on the ferry outside with youth all around me, talking about my tattoos. And then another landing we did was on the same. We came back like 5 days later. Another group of young people who I was giving a talk to, and they were there from another place, seeking a story or wanting to know because I look so different out of this world with facial tattoos and short and with black hair. They were just so taken. They were so interested, and young people are amazing.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I love that too. I'm actually
Yeah,
wearing, I find that with jewelry too. They're like, what is that? Because I'm wearing antler
yeah,
jewelry and
yeah,
beadwork. So and I do have, I was gifted walrus
yeah.
whisker earrings. So
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So children love, looking at those things and going, "What is that? Can you tell me where that came from?
Yeah.
How did you get
Yeah.
that?"
Yeah. Yeah. And where can I get?
Yeah. They're good
Yeah.
conversational teaching pieces to introduce to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed this.
Me too. Thank you.
I hope you found it as engaging as I did. My takeaways from this are reconciliation and the opportunity for us to truly come together and inspire change. I'd like to thank this opportunity or take this opportunity to thank Aaju Peter for her compelling story and life journey that she has shared with all of us, invoking change and really inspiring all of us to focus on an opportunity to do something different with our lives and to truly make a difference. And what she showed us in this particular presentation was the opportunity for all of us to have a chance to inspire change. Change and advocacy has no age limit. And all of you today in this audience have a chance to work together and really impact reconciliation. An event like today does not come together without an engaging audience such as yourself. And I really want to thank all of the educators who have enabled you to be part of today's session. And to all of you who have participated in today's event, all of the students across the country, you have joined us to learn and to truly have a better understanding of what truth and reconciliation can do. In Aaju Peter's presentation today, she talked about her upcoming documentary, Twice Colonized, and the two experiences that she has encountered as she has questioned colonization throughout Canada. And so I hope that all of you have an opportunity to sit back and reflect on today's session with your teachers and to think about how you can invoke change within our country. At RBC, we recognize that education is a vital component of the reconciliation process, and we're honored to be part of this important dialogue today. This will conclude today's Twice Colonized Truth and Reconciliation session, and we thank every one of you for joining us today. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.